Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're unpacking a pretty massive paradox, the fundamental difference between true freedom and modern enslavement. Using a really deep Islamic conceptual framework drawn from our source material, we're going to explore how invisible chains of subjugation operate in our world right now. Let's just dive right in.
We're kicking things off with this traditional calligraphic invocation, "In the name of God, the most gracious, the most merciful." This just sets the spiritual and academic foundation for today's analysis, really framing our entire discussion on what it actually means to achieve human liberation.
So here's a philosophical challenge for you to confront. Despite all of our technological progress, our modern democracies, and our day-to-day comforts, are we actually free from invisible chains today? Or, have the methods of subjugation simply evolved to become way harder to see?
Look at this quote from the source material. It brilliantly illustrates that the core purpose of divine revelation has always been absolute human liberation. But here's the thing. It's not just about breaking physical iron chains. It's about freeing ourselves from the domination of other humans, and crucially, freeing ourselves from the domination of our very own desires.
All right, here's our roadmap. We'll start with the concept of enslavement, move into the political and Sharia definitions, compare servitude versus enslavement, and finally look at forms of modern enslavement.
Section 1, the concept of enslavement. To truly understand our current reality, we really need to build a shared vocabulary and look at the linguistic roots of these concepts.
First up is the Arabic term Ubudiyyah, which translates to servitude or worship. In its pure linguistic sense, it involves deep submission, humility, and compliance. But the absolute crucial element here? Consent. It's a willing surrender. It's driven either by a desire for reward or a fear of consequences, meaning ultimately it's a personal choice made by a free intellect.
Now flip that around to Isti'baad, enslavement. This concept completely, and I mean completely, strips away that idea of consent. It relies entirely on subjugation, coercion, domination, and exploitation. It's all about overpowering someone without their willing agreement, basically reducing a human being into a mere tool for someone else's benefit.
Section 2, political and Sharia enslavement. Let's see how these linguistic roots translate into real-world political and theological definitions.
The political definition? Well, it's brutal. It's highly transactional, focusing entirely on the ownership of one human by another, forced labor, and the horrific reduction of a human being to mere property. It's about holding absolute worldly power over another person's physical body. It's literally the complete negation of human dignity.
From the Sharia perspective, however, we see a really profound duality. On one hand, enslavement to God involves divine laws that are explicitly meant to bring humanity to ultimate happiness and spiritual reward. But negatively, any subjugation separated from this divine worship, like, say, submitting to flawed human systems or tyrants, is true degrading enslavement, completely lacking any divine intention.
Section 3, servitude versus enslavement. This right here is the crucial pivot of our entire explainer, understanding the absolute contrast between servitude to the Creator and enslavement by creation.
Just look at the stark divergence between these two states of being. Flowing one way is Ubudiyyah, born from willing submission and deep humility. And on the complete opposite side is Isti'baad, built purely on forced subjugation and exploitation. These paths are fundamentally at odds. When you put them side by side like this, a really profound paradox emerges. True servitude to God is the exact mechanism that brings absolute honor. On the flip side, enslavement by creation inevitably leads to degradation. By willingly submitting to the Creator, you're actually shielding yourself from the humiliation of being enslaved by others. Think about it, because God is the ultimate creator, completely free from the flaws and corruptions of creation. Submitting to Him is not a degradation. It's actually the highest possible honor for a human being. Submitting to anything else, whether that's an ideology, a ruler, or a man-made system, simply diminishes your human dignity. Which brings us to Section 4, Forms of Modern Enslavement. Now that we have the philosophical foundation down, let's apply these definitions to the invisible chains of our modern reality. You definitely don't need a physical slave market to be enslaved today. People willingly, or actually sometimes completely unknowingly, enter subjugation through invisible chains. Intellectually, through subservience to flawed ideologies. Psychologically, by becoming a slave to base desires. Physically, through exploitative labor. and economically through the crushing weight of systemic debt.
Let's track that economic one step by step because it's wild. First, international usury and interest-based debt are introduced. Second, weaker nations, or even just everyday individuals, are forced to borrow merely to survive. Third, powerful entities take control of the economy's lifeblood. And finally, complete political and social subjugation follows. It's a highly effective way to hold entire populations hostage without ever needing physical iron chains.
The source text also highlights how organized pressure groups and global lobbies operate within this framework. It cites Zionist lobbies as a specific example. According to the material, by monopolizing major media networks and dictating political directions, these entities actively block movements aimed at genuine freedom. The text argues this creates an institutionalized form of Isti'baad, keeping populations intellectually and politically constrained under the illusion of freedom. And that brings us to this pretty heavy reality from the text. When someone rejects the creator's authority, they don't magically become completely independent. Preferring servitude to one's own desires over servitude to God fundamentally shifts a person's spiritual state. They haven't found freedom at all, they've just traded masters, becoming enslaved by their own unchecked impulses.
So I'm going to leave you with this to chew on long after this explainer is over. Are you truly free? Or have you just traded a visible master for an invisible one? Understanding the deep difference between willing servitude to the infinite creator and forced enslavement by finite creation is the absolute first step toward true liberation. Thanks for joining me, and keep seeking true freedom.